friends, this is Rick, and you're sitting at the table. We are looking at Umbar. I used to call him Umber for years until I started hearing other people's videos and then pronouncing it as Umbar, and Umbar probably is the appropriate pronunciation for it. As you can see, this particular supplement is missing its cover, which I'm terribly upset about. I'm well, not terribly, but I am upset about it. I do not remember when it fell off and what happened to it. I honestly can't tell you. I've had these books for decades, and some of them are showing their wear and their age, and there's no getting around it. Some of them were subject to some less than ideal conditions over the decades as well, which is, regrettable now. In hindsight, if you this here was, I'm guessing, was some kind of mold or something at some point, because there was a stretch between my first marriage and my second marriage where I lived in my parents' basement, in the basement of a 120-year-old house with somewhat porous walls. It's not a conducive, it's a very moisture-rich environment, not conducive for paper products, even though I was trying to keep the humidity at a minimum down there when I was at it. So who's to say where the covers are? Plus, these material books were never intended when they created them to last for 100 years. I mean, they're just not. The creators probably didn't even cross their mind that we would, here we are 20 or 40 years later in some aspects. Literally, because this was copyrighted in 1982. So next year we'll make this particular printing of this particular book 40 years old, that they didn't think that these would still be sitting on somebody's shelf 40 years later. Anyway, there's also a map to this, which might have been in that box I was just looking at in my previous video for found maps, or it's in this stack over here, and I'm just ambitious enough to go digging through it right now to get it. I wish, like I said, the cover had survived, but it's still a great module, and I got a lot of use out of it over the years. I liked Umbar as a setting. It also translated fairly well over into other fantasy. D&D was my go-to for most of my campaigning rules and things like that, and game systems or games, because the players I had were more understood Dungeons and Dragons better than trying to learn the Rollmaster MERP system, and it was just more easier, less issues. So we have our typical supplement. This is also one of the early printings, one of the handful of 7 or 8 of the books that they put out right at the beginning as kind of a mass offering of stuff. So anyway, we got our definitions and terms, and dice rolling conventions, a little bit of history going on here, racialized cultural groups, the elves, the dwarves, the humans, Dunedain, Eastling, Northmen, orcs, trolls, etc. Middle Earth campaign, creative foundations, adapting module to your fantasy. So we get abilities to switch this around. This is why I could use D&D real easily, because the basic concepts of converting to the stats over to D&D system is all right here, and it was fairly straightforward once you got used to doing it. We have a key for the maps and what represents what on them. Then we got Umbar, the Lord of the Rings. In the Lord of the Rings is general history. Basically, this is one of the earliest large settlements by Normer back in the Second Age, and it predates Gondor and Arnor by many centuries. It is also the haven of the descendants of the quote kingsmen of Normer, or the people who were opposed to the Dunedain and the quote faithful who do settle in Gondor and Arnor, which leads Gondor and Umbar into open conflict and into Candlestein secret conflict for the entire existence of Gondor. Gondor had a ready-made waiting foe when they got here. There were certain centuries when Gondor controlled Umbar, captured it, controlled it, but for the majority of the time they did not, and it was a conflict, an area of conflict and issue that rose and fell depending on the times. And of course, toward the War of the Rings, it was definitely firmly in the camp of anti-Gondor and pro-Sauron, and created quite a few problems, which also helped to thin down the Gondorian army that was be available at Minas Tirith for the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. There's so much rich possibilities that we see, and Umbar itself actually only is referenced in the novel a handful of times toward the end. But the fact is that there's a very deep, rich connection with the whole story of Gondor and Numenor and so on and so forth. So then we got the general political structure of Umbar and power organization, all of about 1640, which is usually where most of our MERP campaigns are set, about 1,000 odd years prior to the War of the Rings. And we got people and culture at Umbar, the descendants of Numenor, the coastal peoples, the Herodin, the ecology at Umbar, the city itself, the grand city plan. In 2280 Second Age, Umbar was made into a great fortress of Nuremberg. The first wall was built encircling a higher ground overlooking the Bay of Bephalis or Bay of Belpolis. Yeah, Bephalis. The sea laid out inside it. The stonework in this wall is superior, best example of the genius of Nuremberg, both strong and beautiful, with alternating sizes of stone forming pleasing patterns. As Umbar grew, etc., it expanded. So we got interior maps. That's a city sewer system. Typical taverns of Umbar, 4 maps, some artwork. I like the artwork. Tower holdings of the captains of the havens. The politics of Umbar is led by, it's basically like this council of captains, and each one has their own tower, and it serves a purpose and a role in running and supervising Umbar as a whole. So we have the Flame Tower, the Seaward Tower, the Red Tower, Fasthold, Westerly Tower, and there's others. Generally known information about Umbar roughly at 1607, so this would have been 33 years prior to the 1640 usual campaign. Currently ruled by Oligarchy. Excuse me if I can't pronounce the damn thing. Oligarchy. I know how it's supposed to read, I just can't pronounce it. 6 who call themselves captains of the havens. Each has a fleet and direct liege lord of approximately 1/6 the arable lands around the havens. So Umbar is not a country per se, it's more like a city-state with an ocean-going power, an ocean-going base power of a large city-state. So it has some surrounding lands that they claim and control directly, but not sufficient large enough of them to have more towns and villages of any significant worth. And it doesn't go into the desert very far, or along the coast very far. So in truth, it's just a really large, powerful city-state, which doesn't make it any less of a foe to deal with. It's because their primary power is seagoing, and that's where they can conflict against or run up against Gondor's naval designs on a frequent basis. We got organizations of Umbar, the Wizards Guilds, the Smugglers, the Merchants, the Thieves Guild, the City Guard. We got Religion and Healers, Ships and Sailors, Shipbuilders Guild, Basic Ship Designs. This was another reason I used Umbar a lot, because of all the Middle Earth campaign supplements and source books, and this is the one next to Peligar, or Pelagar, however you want to pronounce it, that contains the majority of material on ocean-going vessels and rules and concepts for that sort of thing. So we got Black New Marine designs, Corsair designs, the Corsair War Fleet, the Herodin designs, naval warfare, crew and slave ships, the Armorers Guild. We have information about the Dark Religion. The Dark Worship has a minimal visible presence in Umbar of 1607, and etc. Blah blah blah. Some evil spells. A layer of dark castles of Umbar. So each of the 6 castles, lords of Umbar, control the fertile land around it. There are 8 to 15 villages and 3 or 4 simple towers under the direct control of the castle lord. These towers are made simple strongholds of 10 to 12 warriors. Like I said, as entities go. Umbar is a very large city-state. Yes, it has to have some controlling farmland, arable land around it to feed the people of the city, and they have small villages where the farmers tend to reside, but it is not on the scale of a country. So it's to me, it's still just a very large city-state. Uh, so we got various castles, Colonor and Adris. That's something to note. That the captains of the havens, the leadership of Umbar, maintain fortified towers and structures inside the city of Umbar as part of the defenses and as part of their proof of rulership or their right to control. And then they have castles in the surrounding arable lands, and that's what these represent. So these people truly do have some deep pockets and some reach, and each one has its little bit of stats and information about it. In particular, Adamar is the fight for Eredor, Eredor, the castle lord of Peldor, who was very loyal to Eldor. He began to service, etc., etc. So, typical village, charts and tables for typical animals, price lists, healing drugs, enhanced magic items, summary captains of the havens, or a little more detailed of the head of top NPCs, the NPC summary chart, master military chart, already made stats to be easily plugged in and played, suggested player character backgrounds, random people in Umbar, random peoples in the areas surrounding Umbar, some suggestions about adventures, and a player character map. Like I said, I have the map. I just didn't want to dig it out. That's my bad. Umbar at other times, Third Age 935, Third Age 3020, about just after the fall of the Lord of the Rings. This Dark Lord is just fallen, destroyed when the One Ring forged by as part of his power was destroyed. Followers of Sauron who were supreme in Umbar have fallen, and the city waits in shock. The great fleets that sailed to destroy an old enemy, Gondor, have been destroyed, and those few who return to Umbar whisper of great wizardry and an army of the dead. Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. That Aragorn rallies the Oathbreakers at Urk and leads an army of undead to the coast, which overrun the fleets of Umbar and the current captains of Umbar at the time, and they're all destroyed, killed, destroyed, or just killed, suicide by jumping overboard and drowning, or are captured and more or less terrorized by the hordes of undead that overwhelm them. This leaves a vast fleet of ships in the hands of Gondor and Aragorn at the very opening. So some of these ships would be suitable to be repurposed and put into operation for Gondor and to service Gondor. The rest probably were scrapped or destroyed. This basically guts Umbar as a naval power for a long time. They're not going to be in a position to do much for many decades, which allows for the ease of the conquering of the city-state when Aragorn gets to that point in his reign in the Fourth Age. There you go. So ship summaries, and there you have it. Otherwise, a great supplement. I have used it a lot. I am sorry that the cover is missing. I don't know what I can do about that. This is Rick. Until next time, you guys have a great weekend.